Good morning, everyone. It's nice to see a lot of familiar faces this morning. We are making donuts this morning. I am very excited. Lacey is on a well-deserved vacation. So might have technical difficulties because Lacey is the expert technical user of Zoom and she has left us in charge. We're not sure about that, but we're going to do our best. So forgive us. Any questions you have, feel free to put them in the chat. Harlow is here and is able to answer food questions along with me. And just saw her go there in the back. And Harlow cooks with me in the historical kitchen all the time. And Sam, my son, who is hiding behind me over here, he tests recipes with me in my home kitchen a lot. So they are with us today. And Rebecca, what is your title here at Gunston?
So I should have introduced myself. Yeah. I'm one of our full-time educators. So I've actually been here for about 4.5 years. But I am not a food history expert. So if you haven't seen me before, it's because I was running around behind the scenes. I'm very, very happy to be here helping out for this program. I'm gonna get this recipe back up.
So this recipe is, the Cooking in the Archives, which is at rarecooking.com, is a great website. And if you're interested in historical cooking at all, I would highly recommend going to visit it. She is an archivist and she has tons of recipes that she tests from handwritten manuscripts. And she did this recipe and I decided that I wanted to do this recipe. My version is slightly different from hers because anybody who's done this with us before knows, historical recipes are not very specific. So mine is slightly different than hers. Mine has a little more sugar and a little more flour and a little more spices, but her recipes are great and I would highly recommend you check those out. So I just want to thank her on our Zoom for finding this recipe. And this recipe is, very interestingly, from a Scottish manuscript. And it was from a manuscript from a man who was a Scottish Quaker, who was the governor of, Harlow, help me out, East Jersey?
East Jersey, yes.
East Jersey, as in part of what became New Jersey, even though he never stepped foot in the United States. And the part of these papers is what is his daughter's recipe book. And this is from that recipe book, which, Harlow, do you have the dates?
I can look at.
Oh, I have them. Sorry. 1690. Okay. There we go. 1697 to 1723. So this recipe is from somewhere in that time. And if you want to take a minute to read this recipe, and then if you have any questions, throw them in the chat. Sam, you want to throw that chat? This one has some great spelling.
Mm-hmm.
They really like their double L's.
They really like their double L's. So I have a lot of questions about this recipe, like how did Scottish Quakers get a Dutch recipe? I don't know. And if you go look up donut in the Oxford English Dictionary, you will see that they date it from 1782, which is clearly a lot later than this recipe. So my librarian heart was very excited that I got to send this to the Oxford English Dictionary so that I could say I have a predated donut for you. And not only that, but it is spelled D-O-N-U-T, which is very rare, not for an early recipe. So that's very odd. Let's see, anybody notice anything else weird about this recipe that they want to talk about?
Rachel,
yeah.
To answer your question on how the Scottish settlers got the Dutch recipe, was through Dutch settlers coming to the colonies and then that recipe got spread around.
Well, that would make sense. It just made,
Yeah.
because they're donuts, and the minute someone had one, they said,
We
These
need more.
everyone should make them.
I'm gonna take down my screen share right now so that we can see. We've got a question. I just wanted to make sure that we didn't have any outstanding questions in the chat. Is there anything that anybody's curious about before we get started on the really delicious part, or are we ready to jump into it? I'm gonna give people a minute. Oh, this is a great question. Okay, we've got a visitor from Cardiff. Thank you so much for attending in a different time zone. We use kilograms and grams here, or stone, pounds, ounces if in the UK. Out of curiosity, when did the US and UK divide measurements? This is a really great question. It pertains to the history of science, which is something that I did a little bit of research on when I was doing my master's in public history. But I never actually researched this specific
I
question.
happened to just listen to a book that this came up in.
Yeah.
So handily, otherwise I would not have known the answer. And it was joining the EU. The English had to switch to the metric system. That was when they switched, but obviously kept some. No one can ever get the English to stop using stone for weights, and the pint. I'm going to tell you, the Wikipedia article for the pint is weirdly fascinating. And you'll see this recipe calls for an English pint. Some of her recipes call for a Scottish pint. Apparently, if you go to Australia and you order a beer, you want to make sure you order an English pint, or you will get an Australian pint, which is less beer. So, but you'll get charged the same if you order an English pint, and you'll get more beer. It's the most weirdly fascinating article I've ever read on Wikipedia. Highly recommend it. So it was the EU. I mean, when they joined the European, what was it called before the EU? The European Commission. That was when they switched.
I think one of the things that's interesting to think about is kind of how all of these different measuring systems started to change. There are a lot of different things that change once the United States declare their independence. Like, for example, some of the units that we use for our money, and then they continue to change for a while. Some of these questions are hard to answer because sometimes there's not necessarily a specific date when that change happens, or sometimes there are multiple changes. So yeah.
My other recommendation for things on the internet that are fascinating is if you Google Saturday Night Live George Washington, maybe a month ago, there was the most amazing skit. Rebecca, did you see this?
I don't think I did. I haven't been up to date on SNL this season.
We will watch it before I leave today. George Washington rallying his troops before Valley Forge, and it has to do with measurements. And his troops are like, aren't you supposed to be rallying us about like defeating the British? But he's rallying them about using not the metric system.
That's so funny. All right, do we want to get into the
Let's get into this.
The really tasty part?
So I have pre-melted, it's always hard to see in this light, pre-melted 1 stick of butter or a half cup of butter in a cup of milk. So I've pre-melted that, but I'm going to start with, need to fix the light on this, Rebecca, next season. And this is, so this recipe, you know, normally we cut these recipes down to, you know, sort of small portions. This one, because it called for 1 whole egg and 2 egg whites, I couldn't, Sam is my math genius, and no matter how hard we tried, we could not make this recipe any smaller. So it does make a lot of donuts. So this is 1 egg and 2 egg whites, and I'm just going to mix them together till the yolk breaks up. And I'm going to add to that 1/3 of a cup of sugar. You can add, if these are not very sweet, if you want an extremely sweet donut, I would add more sugar. We did our first test, Harlow, I think we used a quarter cup. And we decided they really needed more sugar just to give them flavor. And we went up to a
Yes.
third.
Before when we first tested the recipe, it tasted more like if you had like fair, like fried dough, it was less sweet and more just kind of a
Yeah. That's one of the things that we see, even if I necessarily am not the greatest hearth cook in the world, in some of the historic cookbooks that I've read, one of the things that I've noticed, and I think Rachel, you probably will have noticed this too, is that some of the foods that we know today as savory or sweet foods, sometimes in historic records are not as savory or not as sweet, or sometimes have shifted categories entirely. The first dish that I ever tasted in 2019 when I started working at Gunston Hall was a sweet spinach pie. And I couldn't conceive of a sweet spinach pie. It was very weird to me.
I swear that sweet spinach pie comes up at least 3 times during every season in History in the Kitchen because Lacey and I still can't get over the sweet.
It's so funny to us.
So I am putting into the egg and sugar a huge chunk of fresh grated ginger. Harlow loves ginger and she grated this for me, and I'm going to put all of the ginger in for her. So ginger was available in powdered form and pretty sure in root form. The recipes are very vague about how ginger, when a recipe it usually just says add ginger. We know there was powdered ginger, but ginger had been available for, it was one of the oldest traded spices. Most of you will know that gingerbread has been around for a long time, and the root travels pretty well. So in this recipe, we've done it with powdered ginger. I think the fresh ginger is better. And then I'm just going to add powdered cloves and nutmeg to the flour.
And just so, excuse me, just so everyone knows, I have pasted a link in the chat to the recipe again. If we have anybody who is cooking along with us, please feel free to pull up that recipe on our website.
So I don't know which order it is in the recipe, but I'm going to do milk and butter first. We're just going to combine everything together.
That was the milk right there.
Yep. No matter how many times I do it, I'm always paranoid about cooking the egg in the hot milk. So that had cooled a bit. So this dough is extremely soft. As you can see, I still have to put the egg in my on camera. I still have to put the egg in, and it's going to be very, very squishy, but it works. We were very dubious.
It has a beautiful result.
Let me tell you, you add ginger to eggs and it makes a really ugly color. So ignore that horrible color. So I'll do, and while I'm mixing this, I'm going to start heating my oil, and we can talk about this recipe. One of the things I find really fascinating about this recipe is that they are cooked in butter. I don't think I've ever seen a recipe, or fried in butter. I don't think I've ever seen another recipe from this time period where something was fried in butter. Cooked in butter, definitely, but I haven't seen anything sort of fried in butter. And I mean, definitely there was lard available in Scotland. It's not like they didn't have lard, and it's not like they wouldn't have, it's not like lard would have been off their diet. So I find it really interesting that this was fried in butter. But both Harlow and Sam can attest that we have tested this in butter, and they were good. They were tasty. We brought them around the neighborhood. Everybody had them. But if you've ever cooked with butter or fried with butter, you know that it burns very easily and it gets black very easily. And so the first batch was lovely, and then the butter would start to burn, and you had tasty donuts, but they were very, very ugly because they were covered with burnt butter. And so I tried it with clarified butter, which is butter that is melted and then the fat solids are skimmed off, or ghee in Indian cooking, and they were much prettier. But they were almost too rich. My child, who loves sweet food, was like, they're almost too buttery. And so we took half that batch, and I was like, well, we have oil. It happened to be Hanukkah. I was like, let's put them in oil and see what happens. And I have to say, they made a lovely donut, which is the donut that has been on social media, has been the picture on social media. And so this morning while we were setting up, we were talking about, do we do them in clarified butter? Do we just do them in oil? Do we do them in both? And we decided we're just going to do oil because they're a much prettier donut. But they definitely work in butter. If you do them in regular butter, they will be tasty. They may be ugly, but they will taste good. So, and then oil's heating, so I'm sort of squished here. So this is when on the recipe I wrote 2.5 to 3 cups of flour. This was 2.5, and you can see there's no way that's going to roll. So I'm going to add more flour. And when we tested these, Harlow and I kept adding flour and adding flour and adding flour. And as far as we could tell, they never tasted any worse for wear. So
I believe it.
Yeah. So I think the answer is add flour until it's sticky, but you can handle it. And at some point, you're probably going to need to turn it out on a board. And again, it makes a huge batch. So definitely going to want to work with part of it. So I'm going to blorp some out here to figure out how we can see this. Let's go back here. Okay, can we see that, Rebecca?
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
it looks like you're having fun.
It is kind of fun. So you can see this is extremely soft still, but it works. So it says to roll it out, which makes me wonder, was hers thicker? I don't know. But I'm following her recipe. And I'm doing what she said, and it works, and they taste good. So that's what I'm doing. I just dropped a tiny little bit of dough in my oil to see if it was heated up yet. It's not. You want to make these pretty thin because we're not, Harlow, what did you call it? Submersion?
Yes.
Frying. We are going to flip them over. So you want them to be pretty thin so that they cook fast. And she
And
said,
how much oil would you say is in your pan? What how high is that layer of oil?
I'm going to say this is 1/2 inch of oil.
Okay, cool.
So it was, and we put in more oil than there was butter. The butter was not very high, but they don't puff up as much in the butter. They stay much flatter. So the 1/2 stick of butter does not make a very high amount of butter. So again, this is one of those ones where you just sort of have to figure out how it works. And it's a donut, so it's going to taste good.
So I just wanted to give a little bit of history while you were talking about the amount of flour that's in here. I wanted to remind us that when we looked at the recipe, what the recipe says is take 1 English pint of flour. And so the question is, what is an English pint of flour? What does that mean? According to a little bit of research that we've done, it's only in the 1820s when it is kind of officialized what an English gallon and an English pint are. And before that point, there are different understandings of what a pint is all over Europe. And so that's the biggest, I would say, one of the really big challenges that Rachel and Lacey and I and all of our other staff here deal with when we're trying to recreate these recipes is figuring out how to interpret these measurements, as we've been talking about.
Yes, and we of course don't know, unlike a nice blog post now where we have a picture of what their
Mm-hmm.
finished product looks like, we're kind of guessing at what their finished product looks like. I just dropped one in to see if it was going to cook. I actually think half an inch of oil might have been too much because I am submersion.
Okay.
So I just dropped one in to see how my oil was doing. These cook, you want them to cook really fast because they're very thin. This is about, it's probably a little more than a half an inch. So you want them to cook really fast. So I'm trying to decide if my oil is hot enough. And I always just do this, especially with this recipe where you have so much dough. It's worth it to just sort of test one out and see if you think it's hot enough. Because really 1 minute per side is going to be, we want to be enough. So I think I still want a tiny bit hotter. And of course, this is also one where the stove here is going to be different from my stove at home.
Sure.
So
we have electric burners here in this kitchen. Not everybody does, and that's okay. You'll just have to do a little bit of experimentation.
And the experimenting is part of the fun, I think.
Exactly. Exactly.
It's definitely part of our fun. We definitely Sam and Harlow, were the dinosaur nuggets the best thing we ever tested?
Yes.
Yes.
Harlow, can you explain what the dinosaur nuggets were, which were not the 18th century part?
So the original two recipes that we were testing, one was essentially just mashed potatoes, and then the other one was, I don't remember what exactly it was called.
Was it like green gravy or something?
Yes, it was like a green beans with kind of a spice, not spicy, but had quite a lot of spices in it, kind of gravy. And we had seen a post online about someone who had made essentially what is a mashed potato mountain with dinosaur chicken nuggets and then a river of kind of like green beans or gravy or something like that. So we kind of reconstructed one, and it was, I can say, delicious.
That's one of the things that I think we try and incorporate here at Gunston Hall is a little bit of modern, but very much inspired by what we find in historic recipes. I wish I was there. That sounds really, really delicious.
Maybe I think for a cocktails, and it was really good.
Cool.
And,
we have if you happen to be local to us or open to traveling, we have an event called Cocktails by Candlelight that's for visitors who are 21 and up. And the next time our Cocktails by Candlelight event is on the books is, I want to say, sometime in May. I'm going to double check that date right now just so that I can let you all know. I know that we have a variety of people joining from a variety of places, but if you'd like to tell your friends who live in the area.
Just for ease of timing on the show, I have been sort of squishing these a little flatter just so they would cook a little faster. Again, if they're fatter, you just cook them a little longer. They're going to get cooked in the fat. pulled out that first one. It had been in there for a while. I think I'm gonna have a 3-leaf clover donut there now. But these two cooked pretty fast.
Cool. So I believe that Friday, May 10th is our next offering of cocktails by candlelight. That's an evening event for people who are 21 and over.
I didn't know if anyone was had noticed this, but as you can tell that these donuts don't
Harlow
have-
is very quiet.
sorry. These donuts don't have the classic hole in the middle that more classic donuts that you see around now. Some research that we've done here is that back in 1847, an American sailor named Hanson Gregory was the first to kind of incorporate that hole that you now see in donuts. From what was learned, he was making what used to be called oily cakes, was the more old-fashioned name you could say for the donut. He was unhappy with the consistency of the donut that he was making, so he decided to make the hole, which I can assume made it cook more evenly. So I don't know if anyone had noticed that, but that's just some history that we have learned here.
Sam's showing us. Sam, who's that an image of that you're showing us?
It's the donut guy.
The aforementioned person who decided to try and put a hole in a donut. Yeah. Yeah.
So these are cooking really fast now.
Mm-hmm.
It's always, once you get that oil to the right temperature,
Rachel, does it smell amazing?
it smells amazing. I'm gonna just move these for right now. Would have made sense. Oh, no. Thank you for mirroring the camera, so I'm
Sure.
not doing this
Yeah.
backwards.
We tried a slightly different setup with that camera. I didn't get the lighting right, but at least when Rachel goes left, her hand on the computer goes left. So
So I'm just gonna pull out my last ones and then we'll talk about topping. So what is she says she doesn't talk about putting anything on top, and they're actually excellent with nothing on top.
mhm.
But we the first time we did them, we put some granulated sugar on top and they were good. And then we said, you know what would make this even better? Cinnamon and sugar, because cinnamon and sugar makes everything better. And so, which they had both cinnamon and sugar, so why not? So definitely feel free to do cinnamon and sugar. And then the last time I did it, Sam and I said, you know what's excellent on a donut? Powdered sugar. So feel free to top them however you'd like, because we don't live in the 18th century. I think you could probably, if you tried real hard, put jelly in them. Or you could just dip them in jelly, like Zeppelis. Sam will be our donut. This is my son, Sam. We have donut tester. Now my oil is getting real hot. So the other thing we actually found about these donuts is that they're actually a little better once they've cooled a bit. So we definitely give them a little chance to cool, because the ginger is more pronounced once they cool a little bit. Anything in front of it. So that's it. They're this easy. And they're yummy. And you can eat them.
Smells truly incredible.
You all know hilariously, from if you've come to these before, definitely Karen does, that we all have food allergies and issues. So we're always like, we're not cooking these in lard like it says because Rachel can't eat meat, or we're making these gluten-free because Sam and Rebecca are both allergic to peanuts, and Rebecca is allergic to nuts. So then it's like, can Rebecca eat these? But she can eat these.
I'm so excited.
All right, let's see. When you touch the metal that's been in the hot oil, it's hot. I know. Who knew?
Can you tell us actually just a little bit of information about what kind of surfaces we use or what kind of items we use to hold hot stuff when we're cooking in our kitchen?
First of all, if you ever take a hearth cooking class with us, the first thing we will tell you is that if it's black, assume it's hot. Because you can't tell if anything black is hot or not. So we tell people to assume that it is hot. And I am the worst offender in then promptly touching something that is black. So we have been using cast iron all of this season because cast iron is both period and an excellent way to get things evenly heated. And we use little leather bits that we've cut into squares for, what are those things called? Pot holders.
Yes.
None of us have words. So we use those. And we have about a zillion of them. And the other thing is I have a wool apron. Oh, look, we're back. I have a wool apron, and the wool apron wool is very fireproof, and not fireproof, but if it does catch fire, it goes out real fast. And I often will use that to actually pick up hot things. Oh, so our ingredients camera's back here. So really interestingly, when my oil got really hot, you can see that these they puffed a little more. So it's just really interesting to me. Carlo and Sam hear me talk about this all the time, how much I wish that my high school chemistry class had been like food, what does the temperature of oil do to a food that makes it puff more when it's hotter? These are the things I want to know. But so that is donuts. I just burnt those. Let's not talk about it.
I can attest that they still smell incredible. And one of the things that you may notice is that Rachel, again, as she mentioned, she still has tons and tons of batter. So this is the kind of thing that I think would be great for maybe a party, a larger gathering, because you might need a little bit of help getting through all of the batter and all the donuts that this makes.
And definitely you can't see mine over here in the ingredients camera where there. Definitely this padding out part and the cutting them with the cookie cutters is definitely kid friendly. I think, do we have
it looks like we might have
is somebody up there cooking?
Yeah, some folks who are also cooking with us. I don't know if they're cooking the same thing that we are. But yeah, if anybody wants to share whether they've made donuts before and how it's gone, feel free to unmute yourself or to put something in the chat.
We're definitely at a time now where if you want to unmute yourself and ask questions, you will be recorded. And once we stop recording at 11:15-ish, we can stay on for a little bit if you don't want to be recorded and want a question out loud, but feel free to ask out loud.
Absolutely. Yeah, we'll have 2 different question periods. If you want to jump in and ask us anything right now, let us know. And then in a couple of minutes, we'll stop the recording and you can stay on if you'd like.
But you know me, and I have to always ask every time, who's having the weird weather now? Because somebody's got to be having either freezing cold or a blizzard right now. Have donuts always been breakfast? I can actually see the chat from where I'm standing, so sorry.
Yay!
I don't know.
Hi.
Hi. I would guess that knowing from everything that we know about other 18th century food, probably not. I bet you they ate them anytime.
They'd be a good dessert.
Yeah, because they
We
just
know
sort of
that
mixed everything up.
specifically when George Mason's a young man, breakfast isn't a major meal of the day. And so we know that all kinds of different really elaborate fried or baked foods are eaten in the middle of the day. And towards the end of George Mason's life in the late 1700s, we start to see a shift to a supper, a meal at the end of the day becoming more popular. So again, like with measurements, there are plenty of things that have changed over the years. And some of those are slow changes and some of them are faster changes.
And that would depend on what you were. If you were rich, obviously you would have
Mm-hmm.
enslaved people to make you whatever you wanted for breakfast. If
Mm-hmm.
you were a tenant farmer, you were probably eating whatever was left over. You know, you would probably be going out and doing the morning chores and coming back in and eating whatever was left over from dinner last night.
Mm-hmm.
Because of course, if you were a tenant farmer and you were doing your farm wife was doing all your cooking, you would sort of need to wait for that fire to heat back up again. So
We've got a comment here that it is apparently pouring rain in a part of Massachusetts. So I'm sorry if we sent that to you. We got some of that earlier this week here in Virginia.
There's like, I was confused when we came to Dunstan. I was like, was there always a pond there? No, it's
No.
gigantic.
Yeah, there are, as people may or may not know, we have 550 acres of grounds here, and there's a lot of elevation change. And so the landscape here looks different at different times of the year based on how much precipitation we get. We had a wet December. So we're just gonna see. We might actually get some snow in Virginia this year, which we don't always.
we didn't get any last year, did we? I feel like we
Not
got,
that I remember. Not that I
got
remember.
like sleet once.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm from Massachusetts, so I miss snow.
Mm-hmm.
I'm dropping donuts everywhere.
You know, that's what we're here to support you with.
And I was just gonna say, there's something about when it's not your kitchen.
In normal, it's 14 Fahrenheit with a wind chill of -3. Oh my
Whoa.
gosh. All right, let's convert that into Celsius. I used to be able to do this in my head, but I can't anymore. That's -19 Celsius with the wind chill for anyone who uses Celsius measurement. That's that doesn't sound fun to me, but I'm a person who doesn't really like the cold.
I mean,
so.
even from Massachusetts, that sounds horrible.
Mhm.
Yeah. That's,
It's a good day
I mean,
for
when your
virtual
nose gets
program.
frostbitten because you step outside, it's too cold.
Mhm. Mhm.
My
Karen
son just
says-
said I might have to switch to long pants then. 'Cause
Yeah.
he only wears shorts ever.
Karen says that she prefers winter over summer. You are entitled to whatever opinions you might have about weather. I think that you're probably better equipped than some of us are. I know certainly that my mom's from Massachusetts as well, and I know that
She is.
mhm,
Where's she
to her it's kind of funny that I have one winter jacket as opposed to a range of winter coats. So yeah. She was born on the North Shore of Boston. She grew up there.
Cool.
Yeah. All right. So in just a minute or so, we're gonna turn off our recording. We've got to start wrapping up.
I'm going to, and while we do this, so let's see, I'm gonna take one of these and I'm gonna.
Oh, look at that.
This one is really hot.
Be careful, please.
Take me anywhere. So this is one of those early ones when it wasn't as hot, and you can see, so the flatness of this one is
Mhm.
what they were more like in butter. It was definitely when the oil was cooler was what they were like in butter. And in the oil, let me find one that's not blazing hot. You can see they're much, am I on camera? Yes, okay. You can see they're much puffier. And they are delicious.
Yay!
I'm not gonna
Cool.
chew, not gonna misophonia people.
So please join us if you haven't signed up already. Our next event for History in the Kitchen is coming up in February. We'll be cooking fried chicken. So that is very exciting for anyone who might be a meat eater. That is Saturday, February 10th, 10:30 our time. I think maybe 3:30 if you're happen to be in the UK, like some of our guests and visitors today. And all of that information is on our website, which is gunstonhall.org.